June night in Michigan. We don't get too many of them, but we are in the thick of it and excited to be here to talk about what happens next with our Riverfront area in Downtown Midland. This has been a plan of the Downtown Development Authority for a number of years now, and it's popped up to the top of the list now. As we've all experienced over the last few years, COVID has helped us to look at things very, very differently, and part of that is how we use our outdoor space. It forced us to do things like eating outdoors more, meeting with friends and family outdoors, recreating outdoors differently. So it also brought up an opportune time to look at the farmers market differently. COVID and the 2020 flood really forced the farmers market to have to relocate and try a different space, which I think we can all agree we've found to be much more roomy, much more easy to park, much more easy to travel to and from. So now we're faced with the big question: how does the farmers market reconnect with the riverfront area, or does it? So just a little bit about that portion of the conversation today. The farmers market is actually run by the Midland Business Alliance. A lot of people think it's run by the city of Midland, but it's actually a function of the Midland Business Alliance. And they are taking a parallel path, reviewing the farmers market and looking at contemporary designs, looking at spatial options that they might consider as a farmers market, and then together we're going to work toward identifying how that fits into the Riverfront redevelopment plan. So that will be a parallel path and conversation that we'll talk about a lot today and get your feedback on, and then work into the plans that we'll bring back in a few months. So how the process works is, this is just idea gathering at this point. We have no plans for the riverfront as it stands. So Pam Blau, our landscape architect with Pam Blau Architecture, is going to take us through the process. She's worked on several projects here in Midland, including the Poseyville Park project, which she'll talk about a little bit more. So she's very, very keen to what's going on our riverfront area, and will be a great help working us through this process. So we'll gather ideas, we'll take those ideas back to a community survey, we'll kind of test some of those ideas, we'll get more ideas, and then starting in the fall, we'll begin bringing design plans back to the community to get input and kind of see if we're on the right track so far as what you see as a good riverfront design. So with that, we can get on with the brainstorming. Restrooms are through this door and to the right, and there are lots of refreshments in the back, so we want to keep your creative juices going, so feel free to help yourself to the refreshments in the back throughout the evening. And with that, I will turn it over to Pam Blau.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you all for coming out. It's always exciting to get to work on a project and start a project and see all the interest in it and be able to collect those. I do not live in your community, and that's a good and a bad thing, right? Everyone loves to have more people in their community, but at the same time it works very well because I can come in and really often look at things from a little different viewpoint, and we can add more ideas and more, sometimes we have outside ideas that maybe you haven't thought of, and things like that. So don't be afraid if I don't quite have all the information right, or you've got something else you'd like to say, certainly just jump in. What we're really up to tonight, there was a little agenda. It's a very simple evening. I've prepared just some background information to get everybody kind of on the same page, and then what we'll really do is move into discussions around your table focused on the question sheets, and that way you can talk about those and see what ideas and thoughts you might have, and then we'll kind of summarize and get you on your way and try and get as much out of you as we can in the shortest amount of time possible. So let's just kind of move into the presentation and keep it rolling. And you may just, you're okay if you just want to ask a question. You won't make me feel bad or feel interrupted or anything, because sometimes if you have a question, probably other people do as well. So a quick view of the past. Some of you may be long-term community members and some may be newer, but there has been some previous plans completed. There was one in 2008, so that's quite a long time ago, if you really think about it, and 2014, and another little revision of that in 2016, right? So why don't we just go backwards, right? Well, some of those are 14 years old, right? That's a whole generation of kids being born again, right? Or people who were teenagers now are professionals in your community. So things have really changed a lot. Recreation is that way. You know, you think, gosh, that sport didn't exist when I was a kid, right? How about lacrosse now? Everyone's playing lacrosse, right? Or originally we built jogging trails, right? Now they're non-motorized pathways, you know, and we do a lot of different things on them. So things change, so it's always good to take a fresh look. We've had COVID, which the pandemic, which Selena mentioned, and changed. We suddenly have people outside. Another big thing about that is people often focused on being outside for 3 months, right? Memorial Day to Labor Day type thing, but discovered that, you know what, it's kind of nice to eat your lunch outside in October with your friends. Or, gosh, I didn't know, just with a fleece I'd be okay out here. And so our recreational facilities now for Michigan, which I think is wonderful, has become much more dynamic year-round. So that's something else that we think would be powerful to take a look at. And we've just increased. Attendance is up, use is up in all parks, whether it's local parks, state parks, national parks. That is a really recorded phenomenon now. And I mentioned the desire for some year-round activities. So it's good for us to take a new look. So one of the things to take a look at, and I walked around down there some more today. I've been probably in the Midland Riverfront for maybe at least 15 years. I've been coming and eating my lunches down there and different things. But I went down, every time I go down, I look at it with different eyes. And so the project that we're looking at and focusing on is going to be from basically the M20 bridge to the Poseyville Bridge. So if you can kind of put your arms around that's going to be our project area, and on the north side of the riverfront. So we also then, let's see, I got another little slide here. This slide here, you don't have to read it, but what we're really trying to show on this is the blue lines are automobiles, vehicles, trucks, any type of motorized vehicles. So there's 4 main entrances in and out of the site, entrances and exits out of the site right now. Pedestrian, non-motorized, bicycles, things like that. We have the Pure Marquette Trail that comes in at either end of our space. And we have a leg of the Tridge that also lands within Riverfront Park. So you can see we haven't really drawn where they go in there, because I think that's part of that new vision, is to understand how we get to the space, but not necessarily how we might travel within there or to exit in there. So the existing facilities down there, if you've been here in town a long time, you've probably used them, right? They're very beloved. Okay, so the existing facilities down there are very iconic. Everyone generally knows what those facilities may be down there. There's the splash pad, the water park down there is really reached its longevity. If you talk to the city staff that take care of that, the last 3 years they've even had to make parts themselves because they can no longer purchase parts for it. So it's really operating on borrowed time. We also know about that there isn't any parking that the city owns associated with that. The parking lot right there is owned by the H. And it's really in need of replacement. So, right, that opens an opportunity. Do we replace it exactly the same place, or maybe we can move that somewhere else? Selena really talked about the market, not only just physically how it functions, but the building itself has been patched and repaired and had a lot of structural repairs to it. The city knows that it's in need of a lot of attention to continue, if it continues in that location. And there's a restroom there, right? A very small, old restroom. Okay, so the restroom itself doesn't meet current standards. Again, every time it floods, it has substantial damage, and that itself is in need. We have a substation down there that's Consumers Energy. That's owned by Consumers Energy. It's on property owned by Consumers Energy. We can't really move that around, right? That's going to stay. We have the confluence of all the trails that the Tridge comes down, the trails all come in. We have that. That's probably the newest piece down there in the riverfront. And that's probably at least 15 to 18 years old, I would say. And of course, then we have the apartment housing, and that's not going to move. That's a piece that's going to stay where it is. So you can see Karen Murphy brought up in another meeting they call it, what is it, the dock that was put in for an old riverboat that was downtown. They said that's probably the last year they can put that in, because that itself it's so old, it's no longer functioning well, so that's on its last leg. And then, of course, in the background, we have the wonderful remodeled Tridge. So again, don't try and read the fine print, but this is just to show you what we do in our office. Is we do look at all the parcel lines, and we identify all the owners. So if you see that list, that's everything that's down on the riverfront, as well as backs up to the riverfront from Main Street, so that we can make sure as we're designing that we're not assuming we're on someone else's property or making errors to that. To kind of simplify that a little bit, we've kind of color-coded it, so you can maybe get a better idea. So we have the blue area, that's primarily the county buildings and the county uses. The parking lot, the one parking lot down below, is the county's. The kind of the yellow, that's where the Consumers Energy transformer is at. We have the orange, that's the areas encompassed by the H Hotel, so that includes the parking lots in that area. The purple is the apartment building and their parking lot. And then what do we have left is green, and that is what the city owns. So some of that is older street right-of-ways, some of it's parcels, but if you put that all together, that is really what in a master plan we have mostly control of. So I think that's important to understand that if you haven't really understood the property relationships. Yes?
Hi, just to be clear, the actual circle area, the roofing area, that is in orange there, but I thought the city owned that. Or is it
This here,
is it
that circle right
yeah.
there, that is the roof of the farmer's market, for reference.
Okay, I assume that.
And then the round circle that's here in the ground, that's on city property.
That's all city. I just wanted to be sure because you can't tell from here.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And on all the tables, we did include an aerial photo that you can pass around and look at too, to try and see what that is. But we always, in our office, first thing we do is try and figure out, okay, what properties do we have? And I always find in public meetings that's very helpful to share that.
Can I ask a question? Can you
Absolutely.
go back to that other slide?
Yep.
Okay, so you're saying that in the green, there's two parking areas, that are in back, yep, those two. Those are city-owned parking.
Yes.
And then that street that goes up next to the senior housing, that's owned by the city also?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that those areas could be incorporated into the plan?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but, you know, I think if someone wanted to be really technical, they may tell me, well, this apartment land is owned by the city as well, but leased for the housing and things like that. But for all intensive purposes, this tells us kind of what will be in the riverfront planning that we can really focus on. Now, do we want to think about connections and how these fit and how they interrelate? Absolutely. But if we're going to build on them, or if we, you know, I think sometimes this lawn out in front of the H is interpreted to be, for instance, that's a city-owned parcel, and like tonight the showmobile is set up down there and sharing a little of that lawn space, but that is not the city's, and that is the H's event space. Okay, so another kind of topic here is that will affect us as we begin the redesign is a lot of the facilities here are older, and many of them were constructed like the restroom building down there prior to the Eagle permitting processes that are in place for floodplain and floodway. So this is just off the city's GIS, and you know, here's where the market sits. You know, here's M20 Bridge, here's Poseyville Bridge. So this is the site. So the purple is the 100-year floodway, which is where the current is the strongest, and the blue is the floodplain. And so really the entire site that we'll be looking at will fall under permitting and Eagle permitting. So, you know, what does that mean? That means we can't, we really can't put buildings down there. So a lot of people say, wow, we need a really big flush toilet facility. I know Selena's talked, you know, about the fact that the downtown is looking at restrooms as well and looking for places, but it's not going to be on the ground down in the main floodway to be able to permit that. And like I said, they've kept it going as long as they could, but that is going to be a constraint. And as we build and design, we just need to think about water being able to flow through there, right? We can do a lot of things, but we're going to have to think about water flowing, being able to flow through there, and that we don't like build things in there that displace the water, okay? Kind of rule of thumb is everything you add, you have to remove from someplace else as part of it, but then there's also the hydraulics of how that water moves. That's not for you to solve, but I think it's a good awareness to have, right? That we're probably not going to build a wall down the middle of that or something like that because of that. So if you take a look at this site, this is the elevation of the Tittabawassee River. Okay, this is the elevation of the farmer's market roof. We use that because everyone's probably stood under that and kind of felt how high that is. But the 100-year floodplain, you can see, is just under that roof line. And think of as a person standing there, that's like, right, like up over your head. And if you were able to, when it's badly flooded down there, seeing aerial drone shots and things, what do you see? You'll see that roof, but everything else is water down there. So you can see that flooding's pretty substantial, and why Eagle is very strongly working, will have to be included as we work through the construction for permitting. But that just gives you kind of a three-dimensional look at that. So we're really here to kind of more talk about the future tonight. That's just some brief background I wanted to give you. And we have the north side that we're talking about tonight. And then there's the south side that's just getting started on new development. And Selena said she'd had a lot of questions and interest about the south side. So just to give you a little update, we're going to do that tonight, and then we can answer any more questions you have. I know the little bearing on this, again, I don't expect you to be able to read this. It's really to show you that this project is going to be a multi-phased project. And we're looking at construction starting in about maybe 3 to 4 weeks here. City Council on Monday night approved the construction contract for the first phase. So it's a very exciting step to be taken, and we're running through the pre-construction process right now for construction to start. If you've been down there, the tridge leg ends right over here. That comes in right by the ball diamonds. And so that's one point of reference, and then this comes over to Benson Street. And Benson Street was a very significant street at one time, as at the end of this was a bridge that came over to the north side in an angle about like this. So the first phase will be constructing a new parking lot and trailhead here for the trail that will connect to the tridge, come over here, and at the abutment side will be a new overlook and picnic area to coincide with that. Then the east side of the project, Poseyville Bridge runs over top of it. The first phase will be removing a lot of the asphalt and concrete that's left out there and getting the site all prepped up. Then for the future phases will include then wetlands, the creation of wetlands, a mound here with a pavilion, and then an elevated walkway across to North Main Street. Everything will be replanted in native plant material, so it'll be a very natural site and pathways throughout it. So that should be very nice. The one thing you will see real soon out there is all of the plant material that is not native, which is pretty much anything that's alive out there, will be removed, so that it can be made more of a native site, and the banks are going to be reshaped. So you're going to see a lot of dust and dirt for a while, but the end will be a beautiful new site with wetlands and new native material. So look for that coming yet this summer. So the north side is really, what we want to talk about today is your visions for that. And what do we do and how does your work tonight go into our process? Is we're going to develop a new master plan to bring back for everyone to comment on. But, you might think, well, we just go in a room and close the door and design something, right? And if we just do that, you probably will like one thing on it, right? Or will miss what it is you're really thinking. So it's incredibly helpful to have this input, to come in, and we distill that information with Selena and other people at the city, and from that then we begin the designs. So that's how it'll be used, but you can see what kind of the factors, the strong factors that are going to affect it are what land do we have available, right? We're not working on some place we have 400 acres or as much land as we want. We have a very constrained piece. We know we're in the floodplain, okay, and that's going to strongly impact us. And then the other pieces then is relating that to what activities would you as a community, this is what we're boiling down to in your work tonight, will be what activities would you like to have? Is there a certain type of festival you thought about? Or a winter event? Is it example, do you bring in a whole bunch of snow and have a snowman building contest in the winter on a Saturday or something like that? Or think of something in the fall that might be fun, a little Oktoberfest something, or you can come up with a lot of ideas, but you don't have to figure out what you need or how those will be offered. That's more our job. And because people say, well, I wouldn't know what that would take, so I'm not going to write that down. No, that's what we want to get is what are some things that you don't see down there that you wouldn't really like to see? Maybe you've lived somewhere else. Maybe you've vacationed somewhere else. And you've seen something that's really interesting. And then the other piece then will be facilities. We can look for new facilities down there. We have some facilities down there, but there's room for reconfiguring that. Maybe it's some social spaces where you can say, okay, everyone pick up your lunch and we'll meet down there at 1:15 and we'll all just have lunch in the shade under the picnic tables, and a feeling that that's not really a place you can maybe do that right now, but you wish you could. So just write things down is what I don't think you have to have all the answers. You don't have to know where it's going to go. If you have an idea where you'd like it, yeah, put that down. But don't constrain yourself. Just roll out the ideas. And so all those ideas of programming, facilities, working with the floodplain, and working within the land we have. I don't see where we can get any more land at this location, right? So that we have to work within, and that's what will go into the design. So, it's really breakout time. Just would like you to kind of work and talk around your table, because the value of talking is that you can trigger new ideas and different things from each other. Versus if we all just sat in stadium, theater seating, and you turned in a paper at the end. That isn't really as powerful as everyone being able to talk about it. And then if we have time, we can kind of recap, and everyone can maybe hear some of those ideas. Yes?
Just a couple questions, because I'm aware of a little on one edge and a little on the other edge of the property that you're talking about. For instance, I'm going to call it 4D because I don't know what else to call it. I know there's some stuff quietly being investigated and thought about and talked about at 4D. Same with at Emerson Park, because we're going to lose the stadium. So when like for example at Emerson Park, we've got an old but viable skating rink there that a lot of hockey people use, and yet it's, I don't know, we'll just say 3-5 blocks away from the area you're talking about. How do you want us to think about that? Because I believe there's something going on at 4D, it's just not out there yet. And the same with, like I said, like the ice skating rink. How do you want to incorporate stuff like that? Because the ice skating rink is obviously only something we do in the winter, and it's got to have water, but there's...
I think what you would do is write down, you think ice skating would be a nice activity down there.
Okay.
And then allow the process to figure out how or where...
You're keeping it or you're moving it.
Or maybe it's a different shape, or maybe it's just a temporary for... that's brought out for 6 weeks each winter, that then you move on to the next activity.
Okay.
And I think that's a kind of a new concept sometimes for us in recreation, and technology has allowed us to do that, is you don't have to build it and leave it.
Okay.
We've just finished up a large plaza in another city, and it has an artificial turf festival lawn with a stage at the end, but the lawn is also a certain size for a portable winter ice skating rink. And they plan to run that just 6 weeks and make it a splash. Okay, now come for these weeks if you want to go skating, so everybody comes to that. But you can have winter bands then. Why people are skating, or disc jockeys, or we have lights that shine snowflakes down on it, and or you can put hearts for Valentine's Day. So I only bring that up to realize that, again, if you think skating would be fun, just put down skating, and we can maybe figure out ways that that might be accomplished.
Okay. I just didn't know how you were tying either end into.
Yeah, well, how that, whether we borrow facilities or relocate, because sometimes they're not working in one area, we can relocate things and do that.
Cool.
You'll see on the drawing, on the aerial on your table too, we just have made it a white box, right? And that's kind of like, not to call it a black box, but the idea is to think, don't get tied into your ideas because there's a certain piece of parking lot in that spot, or, you know, we can take a look at how that might function better, or maybe shape it differently so we can string the parking out and things like that. I know over the years, I go down there now and there'll be, on a weekday morning, 45, 50 cars parked down there around the market because people are just going kayaking and walking and biking, and that wasn't what that was originally probably intended for, right? It was really intended for a city market. So things change, but yeah.
All right, great discussion. Love all the conversation. We got some really great conversation coming through online as well. So we're going to just quickly start to wrap up. Okay, every table needs to identify a spokesperson. We're going to have you do a little bit of sharing of some of the top ideas that came out of your table. And if you hear something from another table, maybe skip that on your list and highlight the things that we haven't heard, or underscore, yeah, I really liked what they had to say. So,
We can get a little sharing.
Yeah.
Between the tables.
Yep, and we're going to try to get you out of here close to 7:30, so if you can keep it brief, then we will move along to all the tables, and I'll share some of the thoughts that have been coming through online as well. So we're going to start over here at Ryan's table, and I don't know.
All right, I'll do my best to speak for our group. I think there were 3 things that jumped out to us. One, just in general, having more things to do activity-wise for the winter. We felt like a lot of the programming in the summer is great, but there's not a lot of similar programming in the winter. So we'd like to see some of the success that's been on Main Street with the fire pits and other things of that nature be able to extend down to the waterfront. I think the second thing that jumped out to us is just more, I guess, multifunction or flexible use spaces down there for similar reasons. Knowing that we can't put a lot of physical large facilities down there for single uses, having things down there that we can use for multiple uses throughout the seasons, and obviously with flooding being down there, having them flexible for that reason as well. And then I think the third thing that jumped out to us was just connecting in general. So whatever we do down there, making sure that it stays connected to what's already happening on the south of the riverfront right now, connecting up to Main Street, obviously, connecting to the ballpark, maybe going so far as to connecting to Emerson and even over to the Center for the Arts as well. So those are the 3 things from our table. Did I miss anything?
So again, one of the main things was capitalizing on an open air multi-use area that could have a temporary ice rink in the winter, with that being well lit at night, heated for the winter as well. And then let that be like a concert venue / festival area, have summer volleyball, and also use it as kind of a landing area for if we could promote kayak tournaments, whether it be fishing or just racing. And then one of the things that was brought up to kind of solve the structure issue for flooding was if we could have like a bathroom barge, and then use the barge as also having an extended dock area for landing. And then with that, the spray park definitely has to be the spray park definitely has to be brought back, because there's so many young professionals coming in that are having kids in the area, and just safe areas for that are really important. And And then with that, just capitalizing more on those open use areas for, woodworking, competitions, or kind of like live stuff to get people to actively be downtown. And I think that's mostly everything that we talked about.
Just gonna pass it on for you. Thanks.
The bathroom barge. I'm going to be driving thinking of that one tonight.
Okay, we started talking about wanting to be able to see water and stuff and think about how other places where people view water, and thought that it could be a good idea to create a babbling brook that goes down to the river, that you could create parkways and places for people to sit. And then we also thought that it would be good to wrap around the like it starts at Rod and it goes over to the courthouse, and try and create a circle and create the bike path that weaves through, and parking that weaves through, and not as in one big block, and then have features throughout that celebrate and highlight some of the history of the area, from the Larkin lumber to what the Native Americans did at the confluence of the river, and whatever else we'd want to put in there, so that there's many, many different features that people could go to. One of the things that other places have is direct views of the river. Right now, the bike path is 10, 20 feet off. That might be fine for the getting to the destination of downtown, but there's nothing that really takes advantage of being on the river, overlooks of the river, or like, in different places they have steps that go down to the river, and you can just sit on those and then eat there. Anything else that? We had a lot of fun. We had no budget too, so that's the best part.
It's fun to dream a little bit.
The great thing about going later on is you can say, yeah, that too. A couple of things. We also talked about the barge idea, but more in terms of using it as kind of a sightseeing thing, where you could take it upstream, as far as you could up towards Sanford. So I guess that comes in as well. We recognize that the area there is really about bicycling, walking, and just using that, and it's really a park space, and making sure that those are all connected, and it's still a natural park setting. But one of the things that draws people to that area is the Tunes by the Tridge and those types of entertainment areas. And one of the things to consider is right now everybody's kind of scattered around, but if you built a sort of a dirt amphitheater area, so that it's more of a kind of like just an open air amphitheater, and tie that in maybe to a more expanded farmers market. I think having something that's much larger, that provides more cover from the elements. And then also taking on one of the other suggestions here was, as we thought about the spray park, it is used quite a bit by little kids, but little kids also like to play in streams and creeks. And if you could have this lazy river where you would draw river, basically water out of the river, build, I think you probably have to elevate it a bit or pump it up, but then have it so it flows, so it's not just a flat, puddle, and then have it, with rocks and things like that, where kids could enjoy splashing in that in a more natural setting rather than a concrete pad. And the adults too, of course. Let's see, what other things? Yeah, I think those are primarily what we talked about.
We talked about having beach space for to be able to play volleyball, kayak launches, kayaking rentals, paddle boarding, things like that. Also, like space for pop-up vendors where someone that's maybe a hot dog car or Grove Tea Lounge's bike, or places like that, or even like creating movable spaces where they can be down in, and it's, maybe a local maker can come down and have space in that space. We also talked about having an amphitheater, but we considered the senior housing is right there, and so what activities are we thinking about for the seniors that are living right in that space? Do we have like shuffleboard, bocce ball, but other people can enjoy those things too. So those are some of the things. Did I forget anything? And a fountain would be great. And we did talk about Instagrammable spaces, because really young professionals, that's one of the very first things that they do when they're thinking about moving to a city, is they check social media, they check YouTube, what does Midland look like? And so if we're talking about attracting talent, like how are we going to have our city more known in those ways?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, and we have about 10 people that have joined us online, and they've been sharing their comments through chat, and I get the pleasure of representing them online. So some of the comments that came out through chat included a Christkindl market for the wintertime, EV chargers, so electric vehicle chargers, cooling stations, so similar to the water features, but more of just sprays and cooling stations. Bring back the farmers market to the riverfront, even if it's small and you need to enlarge or add to the existing building. Add badminton or pickleball courts, green spaces that can change with trends. So, you know, pickleball is big now. What's the next big thing? But can we have a green space that's flexible for that? Canoe and kayak lockers, so when people are coming down to the riverfront, they have a safe place to store their things. Multi-generational gathering spaces and meeting spaces, green infrastructure with riverbank stabilization, hold a community-wide survey on the farmers market and what the community wants for the farmers market. Events-wise, Winterfest, marathons, food truck rodeos. Somebody echoed the ice skating idea. A launch area for kayaks and canoes, as well as rentals of kayaks and canoes. An emergency phone system, not only in the riverfront area, but along the rail trail itself. Sun and shade areas. Create a living environment through the landscape and the living edge of the waterfront. A festival of lights down there. Somebody who used to live in Midland and is gone remembered the old-fashioned river days, when we did more of the pioneer village down there. Hammock Grove. And that was a good one. I thought this was a unique one. Somebody spoke of a event they've heard of called Grandma's Benches in Zimbabwe, and I don't know if I got that right, but it's basically an area for your elders to come and gather, and young people come and learn things from their elders. So a good interaction opportunity there. Zip line, I was surprised I hadn't heard that more, because I've heard that over and over again. Build a raft or anything that goes on with a river competition, and a climbing wall. And one other comment that came in close to the end, which I agree with completely, is just about universal design and accessibility.
Wow. Good work. Good work, everyone. What else do you need solved? Always something for another night. So just to kind of, again, thank you. Selena's been writing and capturing, and then if you can leave your sheets, those are really helpful too. So the next steps, do you want to go over that, or you want me to? Or?
So next steps will be, we're going to be getting back together with Pam. We'll kind of digest. We had an earlier meeting this morning with stakeholders, property owners, businesses, residents who live in the downtown, so they shared some of their comments with us. We'll gather those, we'll gather these. We will get back together with Pam. We're working on a community-wide survey that's going to launch in the middle of July that will not only test some of the most frequently commented on things we've heard, but will also still gather additional information. And probably around September timeframe, we'll have maybe our first draft put together based on feedback we've received, input we've received, and we'll be bringing that back to the community again. This will go through several iterations. It will go to the Downtown Development Authority for consideration, and then they will pass it on to Midland City Council for final adoption. So we still have a long way in this process, and we will continue to take your input and ideas. You can always email me at the city. If you want to follow this process, we've set up a landing page for it. It's on our City of Midland website, so cityofmidlandmi.gov/Riverfront. So check in there. We'll be collecting emails to send specific information every time we make a new step along this way. If you registered for tonight's event, I have your email. If you didn't, don't worry about it. The registration is still open. If you want to go in and drop your email there, I'll pick it up and add you to the informational list. Otherwise, just drop me a note, and I can do it that way as well. So we really appreciate your time. Pam, any wrap-up comments from you?
No, just thank you. I mean, it may seem like, I don't know how you come, and I hope it was worthy and you got to hear other people's thoughts. I think that's a really dynamic part of the process. Is it isn't, you know, it takes a village to really create a great project. So all your considerations and everything will continue. I think you'll continue to see them bubble up as we go on with the process. So thanks.
We got you out in time to still enjoy this beautiful night. Go down the river.